The Eastern Front was a place where men vanished without a sound. A world of frozen forests, shattered cities, and endless fields where soldiers disappeared into smoke and snow as if swallowed by the earth itself. In this brutal arena, where entire armies were ground to dust, where life expectancy on the front line could be measured in days, one weapon became synonymous with death delivered from the shadows. It was simple, rugged, and often dismissed as outdated by outsiders. Yet in the hands of a patient and disciplined marksman, it became a tool of terror, one that created ghosts out of ordinary soldiers and shaped the course of a war fought across thousands of miles. That weapon was the Mosin-Nagant. Born in the late 19th century, it was never intended to become the symbol of precision death in the vast battlefields of World War II. But the harsh landscapes of the Eastern Front, combined with the Soviets' mastery of camouflage, discipline, and sniper doctrine, turned the rifle into something much more than a simple bolt-action firearm. It became an equalizer, a force multiplier, and a psychological weapon capable of stopping German advances one shot at a time. For the Soviet Union, snipers were not an afterthought. They were a necessity, a calculated response to the overwhelming efficiency and discipline of the German war machine. When the invasion began in 1941, the Red Army was collapsing. Entire divisions were encircled, thousands of tanks destroyed, and cities fell one by one under the relentless advance of the Wehrmacht. Amid this catastrophe, the Soviets realized that traditional tactics could not slow the German tide. But one well-placed rifleman with a clean line of sight could destroy an officer, disable a machine gun nest, or shatter the morale of an entire platoon. The Mosin-Nagant was not a perfect rifle. But it was available in enormous numbers, reliable in the worst weather on Earth, and accurate enough in the hands of someone trained to use it as a surgical instrument. As the war evolved, the Soviet sniper program produced some of the most legendary marksmen in history. Their stories were amplified in newspapers, radio broadcasts, and propaganda leaflets, turning them into symbols of resistance. Men like Vasily Zaitsev, Ivan Sidorenko, and Lyudmila Pavlichenko each became larger than life, figures whose kill counts were whispered by German soldiers as warnings. They hunted German officers with cold precision, eliminating the men responsible for commanding artillery barrages, coordinating armor, and stabilizing faltering lines. And every one of them wielded the same rifle. The Mosin-Nagant, most commonly the 9130 sniper variant equipped with a PU scope. The rifle itself was a product of rugged engineering. It was not elegant, not refined, not delicate. It was built to function in mud, ice, and blood. Its bolt could freeze solid, and with a few strikes of a boot it would still operate. Its barrel, long and unforgiving, provided the stability needed for accurate long-distance firing, and its reliability allowed snipers to lie motionless for hours in temperatures that could kill a man without a single shot fired. It didn't matter that the safety was stiff, or that the bolt was slow, or that the trigger could feel like dragging metal across stone. What mattered was that the rifle always worked. In the hands of someone trained to exploit its strengths, it became a nightmare for the German soldier who never saw where the bullet came from, or who fired it, or why his comrade suddenly collapsed beside him. As the winter of 1941 set in and temperatures plunged far below freezing, the rifle proved its true worth. German Mausers jammed in the cold, lubricants froze, and bolts refused to cycle. The Mosin-Nagant, designed by men who understood the cruelty of Russian winters, continued firing with minimal maintenance. Snipers took advantage of this, using the bitter cold as an ally. They learned to breathe slowly through scarves to avoid revealing their positions. They fired with gloved hands. They set traps with decoys, drawing German snipers into the open where a single well-placed shot ended the duel instantly. For every German advance, for every push across open ground, for every attempt to take a hill or a building, there was always the fear of an unseen Russian watching from a crack in a wall or the shadows of a ruined factory. The Battle of Stalingrad became the crucible in which the Mosin-Nagant's reputation was forged. The city was an urban labyrinth of shattered concrete, twisted metal, and broken windows. Every room, every corner, every destroyed stairwell could hide a Soviet sniper. German soldiers learned to fear the silence as much as the gunshots. The Mosin-Nagant was ideally suited to this hellish environment. Its long sight radius, its predictability, and its durability allowed snipers to engage enemies across streets, through windows, and even through tiny slits carved in brick walls. The rifle became a punishing reminder that every exposed movement, every dash across rubble, every step into the open could be the last. But the true power of the Mosin-Nagant was not just in its ballistic performance. It was in the philosophy behind its use. Soviet snipers were not just trained to aim and shoot, they were taught patience, calculation, and psychological warfare. They tracked targets for days, identified leadership patterns, studied the movement of enemy squads, and picked their shots carefully. The rifle was merely the tool, the mind behind it was the weapon. And that mind was sharpened by the constant pressure of survival, by the understanding that one mistake meant death, and by the knowledge that every successful shot had meaning far beyond the individual target. The Mosin-Nagant also found its legacy shaped by those who used it with unparalleled mastery. Lyudmila Pavlichenko, one of the most feared snipers of the war, claimed over 300 confirmed kills. Her presence on the battlefield was both tactical and symbolic. She demonstrated the effectiveness of Soviet sniper training and inspired countless others to follow her path. Her rifle, simple, wooden, and unassuming, became an extension of her will. She moved with precision, shot with instinct honed by endless practice, and used the Mosin-Nagant to dismantle German positions one shot at a time. Stories of her exploits traveled across both fronts, encouraging Soviet soldiers and striking fear into German ranks. As the war dragged on, the Mosin-Nagant evolved from a mass-produced infantry rifle into a legendary sniper platform. Field modifications appeared everywhere. Wrapped stocks to prevent glare, camouflaged barrels, cloth-covered scopes to prevent fog, and careful hand-selecting of rifles with the tightest tolerances. Soviet armorers knew that their snipers required tools capable of extraordinary feats. They tested barrels meticulously, choosing only those capable of consistent accuracy. Even within the chaos of war, with shortages of materials and the urgency of production, the Russians found ways to craft rifles that could deliver death with remarkable precision. But for every sniper who became famous, there were thousands more who waited in silence, nameless and unseen. They lay in frozen fields for hours, snow covering their bodies until they resembled mounds of ice. They hid in trees, clung to rooftops, and blended into city ruins until they were indistinguishable from the rubble around them. Their rifles rested on sandbags, broken bricks, branches, anything that steadied their aim. They endured hunger, exhaustion, and frostbite. Yet with every pull of the trigger, they contributed to a strategy that slowly bled the German army, weakening its command structure, disrupting its operations, and forcing it to hesitate at every turn. The rifle's simplicity gave it a unique advantage in the brutal conditions of the Eastern Front. While German weapons were admired for their craftsmanship, they required meticulous maintenance and struggled in extreme conditions. The Mosin-Nagant, by contrast, tolerated neglect far better. Soldiers battered them, dragged them through mud, dropped them from buildings, and used them in snowstorms that could immobilize tanks, yet the rifles continued to function. This reliability reinforced the sniper's confidence. He or she knew that when the moment came, the rifle would fire, and that certainty for both the sniper and the enemy became part of the rifle's mythos. The German army soon recognized the threat posed by Soviet snipers. They developed counter-sniper teams, trained marksmen to engage in duels, and equipped them with optics to match Soviet capabilities. The duel between German and Russian snipers became one of the deadliest games on the Eastern Front. It was not just a test of marksmanship, but a battle of patience and cunning. The Mosin-Nagant was at the center of these duels, its long barrel protruding only slightly from cover, its user calculating wind, distance, and the heartbeat-like rhythm of movement across ruined landscapes. In these confrontations, even the smallest mistake was fatal. As winter turned to spring and spring back to winter, the rifle remained a constant presence. It aged with the war, its wooden stock absorbing the sweat and grime of battle, each scratch and dent a silent testament to survival. Many snipers named their rifles, believing that the bond between shooter and weapon could be the difference between life and death. Whether myth or superstition, the connection was real to them. The Mosin-Nagant became not just a weapon but a companion, a silent ally in a war where silence could save your life. The rifle's reputation grew not because it was perfect, but because it was effective. It did not need to be elegant, it needed to survive. And in the frozen trenches, ruined factories, and killing fields of the Eastern Front, the Mosin-Nagant did more than survive. It dominated. As the war on the Eastern Front intensified, the role of the sniper grew from a tactical advantage into a full-fledged strategy of attrition. Entire sectors of the front were influenced by a single well-positioned marksman. German soldiers advancing across open ground felt invisible eyes upon them, watching from ruined barns, dense forests, or shell-scarred hillsides. They moved slowly, anxiously, scanning rooftops and tree lines for the faintest glint of a scope or the subtle shift of a shadow. The power of the sniper was not just in the bullet he fired, but in the hesitation he forced, the caution he demanded, and the fear he instilled. The Mosin-Nagant was the instrument of this transformation, a rifle that brought psychological warfare to every trench and every street corner. The Soviet Union's emphasis on sniper training became unmatched by any other nation during World War II. Schools dedicated exclusively to marksmanship sprang up, converting recruits into elite sharpshooters with remarkable speed. These training centers focused on more than precision shooting. They taught camouflage so advanced that snipers learned to blend into environments as effortlessly as ghosts, vanishing into snowdrifts or shadows without leaving a trace. They studied terrain, understanding how landscapes funneled enemy movements. They mastered deception, using decoys, broken glass, and even reflections from puddles to mislead German spotters. The Mosin-Nagant was incorporated into every aspect of this training. Trainees memorized its quirks, learned to clean it with minimal resources, and practiced shooting until their breathing, heart rate, and trigger pull became synchronized. One of the most important lessons taught in Soviet sniper schools was patience, an attribute the Mosin-Nagant rewarded. Snipers learned to lie motionless for entire days, waiting for a single opportunity. German units never understood how someone could remain still for so long in the bitter cold, but Soviet marksmen were trained to endure discomfort, hunger, and even frostbite. They used animal hides, improvised snow shelters, and layers of rags to maintain body heat. They practiced breathing techniques to prevent condensation from their mouths giving away their positions. And through it all, their rifle rested beside them, a steady partner waiting for its moment. The rifle carried with it the history of its design, a design not meant for elegance but for functionality. Its long wooden stock expanded and contracted with the weather, yet skilled snipers adjusted their aim instinctively to compensate. The bolt-action mechanism, though slower than some of the German designs, forced sniper discipline. Every shot had to count. There was no rapid firing, no wasted ammunition. The sniper's creed became one shot, one kill. A Mosin-Nagant sniper did not engage in firefights, they orchestrated executions. Each bullet carried intention. As the front moved farther west, snipers found themselves in a variety of new environments that changed the nature of their work. Forests gave way to open plains where concealment required ingenuity. Urban combat demanded adaptation, forcing snipers to fire through holes drilled in walls, from behind chimneys, or from trenches carved into floors. Across all these scenarios, the Mosin-Nagant remained dependable. It was long enough for stability, yet manageable enough for confined spaces. Its scope, though simple, was resilient, resisting fog and cracking better than many Western designs. The PU scope became iconic, its minimalist design allowing for quick target acquisition and clear visibility even in low light. German commanders soon realized the threat posed by Soviet snipers. They began issuing orders specifically designed to counter them. Soldiers were told to avoid obvious cover, to move unpredictably, and to refrain from clustering in groups. Officers hid rank insignia. Machine gunners and radio operators, high-value targets, were instructed to remain low at all times. But even with these precautions, the danger persisted. Snipers struck from unexpected angles, firing through gaps that seemed too small for a rifle barrel. They waited until just the right moment, eliminating medics, observers, and runners. The sniper's aim was to fracture the enemy's ability to coordinate, to turn every action into a risk. The duel between German and Soviet snipers became legendary. It was a deadly competition of patience and skill. German marksmen, often armed with modified Mausers and superior optics, attempted to match the Russians shot for shot. In many cases, duels lasted days, with both sides waiting for the slightest mistake. Sometimes the battle ended with a sudden crack of a rifle. Other times, with darkness swallowing the battlefield, neither sniper fired a single shot. But the psychological toll was immense. Soldiers on both sides spoke of the dread of entering areas rumored to be watched by expert marksmen. Stories spread like folklore, enhancing the mythos of snipers and granting them a near-supernatural presence. The Mosin-Nagant was not just a rifle of precision, it was a rifle of endurance. Its presence echoed through battles that defined the Eastern Front. In Leningrad, where the city endured a brutal 900-day siege, snipers operating with limited resources still managed to hold back German assaults with remarkable effectiveness. They rationed ammunition, shared rifles, and took turns maintaining watch. The Mosin-Nagant became a symbol of resistance, its shots ringing out across frozen streets as defenders targeted German artillery crews, sappers, and infiltrators. Even as starvation gripped the city, snipers persisted, their determination fueling the rifle's rising legend. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Mosin-Nagant's reign was how it empowered both men and women to participate in frontline combat. The Soviet Union deployed thousands of female snipers, many of whom became highly decorated veterans. They were often smaller in stature, a trait that worked to their advantage. They moved quietly, concealed themselves expertly, and displayed exceptional patience. The Mosin-Nagant's manageable recoil and reliable performance made it ideal for them. Their contributions not only shocked German forces, who were unaccustomed to facing female combatants, but also inspired generations of marksmen after the war. As Soviet forces transitioned from defense to offense, moving from Stalingrad to Kursk and eventually toward Berlin, the role of the sniper evolved once again. Instead of merely slowing German advances, they now supported sweeping offensives. Snipers targeted retreating forces, eliminated rearguard officers, and cleared buildings ahead of infantry assaults. The Mosin-Nagant continued to excel in these dynamic conditions. Its long barrel delivered lethal accuracy across the vast plains of Ukraine. Its simplicity allowed maintenance on the move. Its reliability ensured that snipers never doubted their weapon when time-critical shots appeared. The Battle of Kursk, one of the largest armored engagements in history, proved that snipers remained vital even amid thousands of tanks and artillery pieces. In the chaos of mechanized warfare, snipers picked off anti-tank crews, destroyed observation posts, and neutralized machine gun nests that threatened Soviet infantry. Tanks could clash by the hundreds, but a sniper could shift the outcome of a local engagement with a single well-timed shot. The Mosin-Nagant was never overshadowed by the mechanized might surrounding it. Instead, it complemented it, offering a silent, precise counterbalance to the roaring engines and thunderous guns of the battlefield. As the Red Army drove deeper into Eastern Europe, the landscape of war continued to shift. Urban warfare intensified, with snipers taking positions in attics, church towers, factories, and basements. Enemy movements were predictable in these environments, providing excellent opportunities for skilled shots. The Mosin-Nagant, with its predictable ballistics and minimal mechanical complexity, excelled in such conditions. Snipers modified their rifles with makeshift rests, customized cheek pads, and camouflage wraps to reduce glare. Every adjustment improved their effectiveness, transforming a mass-produced weapon into a personalized instrument of war. By this stage of the war, German morale had begun to fracture. Soldiers, once confident in their tactical superiority, now found themselves targets in a vast killing ground where danger lurked in every shadow. Reports described German troops refusing to advance across certain fields until artillery bombardments cleared potential sniper hides. Yet even heavy shelling did not always eliminate the threat. Snipers dug deep firing pits, hid in collapsed buildings, or emerged from concealed tunnels. The Mosin-Nagant's simplicity allowed it to remain effective no matter how desperate the conditions. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the Mosin-Nagant's dominance was the way it shaped German perception of the Eastern Front. Soldiers spoke of ghosts, unseen enemies who stalked them relentlessly. These ghosts were not tanks or planes or artillery. They were individuals concealed in snowbanks, attics, and tree lines. Their rifle shots were often the first and last sound a soldier heard. The Mosin-Nagant became a character in these stories, cold, unyielding, invisible until the moment it delivered death. As Soviet forces crossed into Poland, then into East Prussia, the intensity of sniper work surged. German units fought with the desperation of a cornered army, and the landscape, dense forests, rolling hills, fortified towns, offered countless opportunities for snipers on both sides. Yet the advantage often still fell to the Soviets. Their experience, honed over years of brutal conflict, combined with the reliability of their rifles, allowed them to outmatch their counterparts. The Mosin-Nagant, once considered outdated, had become a refined and trusted tool through sheer necessity and relentless adaptation. By the time Soviet troops reached the outskirts of Berlin, the rifle had played a significant role in shaping the momentum of the war. Snipers supported the final urban battles, targeting German defenders entrenched in windows, rooftops, and barricades. They eliminated machine gun crews that threatened advancing Soviet infantry. They neutralized strategic positions that would have cost hundreds of lives to assault directly. In these final days of World War II, the Mosin-Nagant proved once more that simplicity, when paired with skill and discipline, could stand as a decisive force even amid the largest battle ever waged in a European city. Through all of this, the rifle remained fundamentally unchanged. Its wooden stock bore the scars of war. Its metal parts showed the wear of countless cycles, yet it continued to fire true. Its resilience became symbolic, a reflection of the soldiers who used it and the nation that depended on it. It stood as proof that a weapon's legacy is not built solely on design, but on the hands that wield it. The snow had begun to melt by the spring of 1944, revealing not only the shattered remnants of German armor and the burned skeletons of villages, but the shifting tide of an entire war. The Soviet Union, bled but unbroken, was no longer fighting simply to survive. It was pushing westward now, lunging toward cities once thought unreachable, and with every advance, new opportunities opened for the rifle that forged legends in the frozen ruins of Stalingrad. The Mosin-Nagant, in the hands of countless unseen marksmen and women, was no longer a desperate tool of resistance. It had become a weapon of pursuit. The Germans felt it instantly. Every time they attempted to stabilize a defensive line, every time they gathered their strength for a counterattack, something familiar struck them from the tree line or from the rubble of a recaptured town. A single bullet, a single crack. A single man slumping to the ground before his comrades understood what had happened. The sniper war that once defined the siege had now spilled into open country, and the Mosin, simple and old-fashioned yet brutally reliable, was shaping how the German army retreated. German reports during this period became increasingly frantic. Commanders complained about invisible killers waiting along any path of withdrawal. Officers learned to duck before giving orders. Radio operators sat trembling, their antenna wires swaying in the wind as if announcing their presence to the unseen. When a German unit attempted to withdraw across a field, the first casualty often fell long before Soviet infantry appeared. It might be the point man, it might be a sergeant adjusting binoculars, it might be the medic stepping forward with a red cross on his arm. The Mosin-Nagant did not discriminate. It punished hesitation, punished exposure, punished the smallest lapse in awareness. But the rifle itself was not what frightened the Germans most. It was the patience behind it. The Eastern Front was filled with cracks and corners where a sniper could wait for hours, even days, without moving more than a finger. German soldiers learned to fear silence more than gunfire. A firefight at least meant they could see the enemy. A sniper meant they were prey. Soviet marksmen had grown more refined by this stage of the war. Their battlefield education was no longer learned through pure attrition but through formal instruction. Sniper schools had expanded dramatically. Entire battalions of trained sharpshooters now moved with frontline units, each rifleman confident with the same simple platform. The Mosin-Nagant, its wooden stock worn smooth by gloves, grime, and bodies pressed against the earth. These snipers were not the desperate defenders of Stalingrad, they were advancing hunters. To the west, in the forests of Belarus and the marshes of Ukraine, the Mosin reigned supreme. The dense underbrush, the rolling fields, and the shattered infrastructure all favored the man who could hide longer and shoot straighter. Partisan groups roamed behind German lines, many of them equipped with the same rifles used at the front. They stalked supply lines, ambushed convoys, and eliminated isolated sentries. German engineers repairing bridges became routine casualties. Truck drivers refused night assignments. Officers started traveling only with armored escorts. A single rifle, mass-produced and utilitarian, now felt like an omnipresent threat. The Mosin's heavy bolt and blunt features carried the weight of an empire on the move. Everywhere the Germans went, they felt the shadow of a scope glinting in the trees. By late 1944, the Eastern Front had transformed into a vast zone of German withdrawal and Soviet advance. The snipers who once fought house to house across the Volga were now riding tanks into Poland, crouching on T-34 hulls as the massive engines growled beneath them. Their rifles rested across their knees, wrapped in cloth to protect the optics from dust and vibration. When Soviet armored columns halted for fuel or repairs, those same snipers spread outward like a living perimeter, taking up positions on ridgelines in abandoned barns or among broken orchard trees. They struck before German counterattacks could form, preempting ambushes with ambushes of their own. The Mosin-Nagant had become a scout's rifle, a shield for entire divisions, and a psychological weapon all at once. Even the landscape scarred by retreat could not shake its influence. As German troops withdrew through East Prussia, their homeland for generations, they found themselves hunted by an enemy who had mastered patience as much as precision. The Mosin-Nagant carved itself into their memory. Russian snipers seemed to walk through fog, forest, and ruin without leaving footprints. German diaries from this period describe the same pattern again and again. Movements halted by a single crack in the distance, patrols refusing to proceed without smoke screens, soldiers crawling through fields as if crossing open ground on 2 feet had become a form of suicide. And then there was the cold. Even in the final winter of the war, when the German army was exhausted and underfed, the cold still favored Soviet snipers. Their rifles, rugged and nearly impervious to extreme temperatures, performed under conditions that froze the actions of German Kar 98ks and jammed semi-automatic G43s. A Mosin could be buried in snow for hours without misfiring. It could be dragged through mud, banged against walls, or soaked in freezing rain and still fire when needed. It was not precise in the Western sense. It was reliable in the Eastern sense, dependable when everything else collapsed. As Soviet forces pushed into Germany itself, the sniper war entered its final and most intimate chapter. Urban combat returned. Town by town, block by block, Soviet marksmen used their rifles the same way they had in Stalingrad, but with far more experience and far more confidence. They occupied attics and rubble piles, waited along canal edges, and used shattered door frames as rifle rests. Their targets often emerged in confusion, Volkssturm volunteers barely trained. Wehrmacht remnants trying to organize defenses, SS troops fighting with fanatic determination but no understanding of where death was coming from. Berlin became the ultimate proving ground. Soviet snipers were attached to infantry units storming the capital, tasked with clearing intersections, suppressing machine gun nests, and neutralizing enemy observers. The Mosin-Nagant, outdated on paper, proved devastating in the collapsed geometry of a dying city. Every broken window was a firing slit, every shell crater was a hide. Every snaking corridor inside a shattered apartment block was another chance for an invisible marksman to halt German resistance. For the German defenders, the city became a labyrinth of death. A rifle that had once defended the ruins of Stalingrad was now ending the last stand of the Reich. And yet, as the end approached, Soviet snipers fought with a strange blend of mastery and weariness. They had spent years battling from the ground, watching the war evolve in front of their rifle scopes. Many had survived through a combination of instinct, ruthlessness, patience, and luck. They bore scars not only on their hands and faces but on their minds. They had watched comrades fall beside them. They had spent days lying in the snow so still that frostbite crept through their boots. They had shot men who never saw them. And they had done it all with a rifle built decades earlier, a weapon that by 1945 should have been obsolete but instead had become a symbol of endurance. When Berlin finally fell and guns across Europe fell silent, the Mosin-Nagant remained in the hands of soldiers who had carried it across thousands of kilometers of devastation. Many refused to give up their rifles even when newer designs appeared. They trusted the Mosin, its stubborn bolt, its heavy stock, its unwavering barrel. It had saved them more times than they could count. It had become to them something more than a tool of war. It was a companion in survival. After the war, the Mosin-Nagant continued its strange second life. It spread across continents, arming liberation movements, militias, and rebel groups. It appeared in jungles, deserts, mountains, and frozen valleys. Its reputation followed it everywhere, crude but lethal, simple but dependable. Snipers from Finland to Vietnam used variants of it to strike with terrifying accuracy. Even in the modern era, with electronic optics and precision-machined rifles, the Mosin still appears in conflicts around the world. 80 years after its legendary role on the Eastern Front, it continues to create ghosts, but nothing would ever replicate the environment that made it a legend. The frozen streets, the shattered cities, the endless forests, the Eastern Front was a battlefield shaped by extremes. It demanded a weapon that could endure as long as the soldier behind it. The Mosin-Nagant, designed in the 19th century, met that demand in the 20th and continues into the 21st. In the end, the rifle became more than wood and metal. It became a symbol of silent warfare at its most brutal. It blurred the line between man and weapon, between patience and lethality, between survival and dominance. The Mosin-Nagant did not win the war by itself, but it shaped the way countless soldiers fought it. It created legends, forged reputations, and erased enemies so quietly that their comrades never learned where the bullet came from. On the Eastern Front, where entire armies vanished in snowstorms and entire cities were ground into dust, the Mosin-Nagant remained constant. A simple rifle, a patient trigger, a shadow in the ruins, and across thousands of silent moments, across countless unseen confrontations, it carved a path through history. The war ended, the world changed, empires rose and fell, but the rifle that created ghosts never truly disappeared.